two buddies and I went on a hunting trip for bull elk last November, and we were having a great time to say the least. That, however, would soon change after what we saw on the third day. Now, I'm not one for superstition, and I don't believe in ghosts and all, but what we saw out there really changed my view about those sorts of things. The trip started out normally after we parked our trailers at camp. We got there about a day early before the hunt officially started, so we could settle in and get some scouting done. Only Eric and I had licenses because Brian didn't draw out this year and he wanted to tag along anyway. Brian also brought along his German Shepherd named Lucy, which stayed back at camp with a leash that was connected to a metal spike. The spike was so deep in the ground that I wondered if we would be able to get it out. I asked Brian and he just told me that his dog was so strong it had to be that deep. I enjoyed playing with Lucy. She was always excited to see me and would greet me by jumping up on two legs and trying to lick my face. Eric, however, was not amused by her and would constantly yell at her to leave him alone. Anyway, the first 2 days, we saw many cow elk in the valleys and on the side of the mountains, but I thought for sure we would see some bulls out there, but there were none among them. It wasn't until the third day of the hunt that we saw bull elk, but it was too far to take a shot at. Even if we were to hit it, it would take hours trying to pack that thing out. So that evening, we decided to hunker down next to some fallen trees and we were able to watch a hillside. While surveying the area, Brian spotted a coyote about 250 yards walking into a small pond of water, strangely as if it was maimed. Eric took out his binoculars to take a closer look at the thing, and he started saying, "That coyote, it ain't looking right. It has a hunch on its back like a bear, and its jaw, oh man, its jaw seems like it's broken and now it's just drooping there like a dead fish. Let me see those binos," I asked curiously with an outstretched hand. Eric handed them to me, and as he did, he seemed to grasp his gun tightly. I took them and I looked at the animal and said, "You're right, that thing's jaw is just hanging there. Also, did you happen to notice its hair? It looks so long and unevenly dispersed." I then handed the binoculars back to Brian, and he looked at the coyote for 1 second and screamed. "Shh, Brian, shut up, we're hunting," Eric whispered harshly. "What did you see?" I asked, as I looked at his shocked facial expression. Brian looked at his feet and muttered, I saw my dog Lucy, but it wasn't her. I don't know what it was. It couldn't have been your dog. When I looked at it, it looked like a dying coyote. It didn't have the large black spot on its back or your dog's strawberry red sides or underbelly," I said in a plain yet confused manner. "Well, since we ain't gonna see anything out here cause you screamed like a baby, I'm gonna put that coyote out of its misery," Eric said angrily as he raised his rifle and looked through the scope. A large shot followed and we saw the animal drop down soon after. It was a clean kill, and Eric was curious as to what was wrong with the animal, so he started getting ready to hike out. He got his stuff together and he said, "You probably just didn't get a good look at it, Brian. Your dog is fine." Brian stood up and he brushed the dirt off his butt and replied, "I swear I saw my dog, but an evil, demented version of it with human eyes. But you guys are probably right. There's no way she could have had the strength to yank out the metal stake holding her back at camp. Well, let's go and find out the truth about this animal," I said somewhat excitedly as I started walking towards the dead animal. It took us about a half-hour hike to get over to it, and we lost sight of the animal's corpse as we had to pass through some trees. Once we finally got to the spot where the animal dropped, there was no corpse, just a puddle of blood. However, the blood was blackish and very dense. Eric observed the scene and started scratching his head. I could have sworn I shot that thing right through its heart. There's no way it could have just gotten back up and walked off. I had an eerie feeling about the whole situation, and Brian was still afraid that it might have been his dog that got shot. Eric, however, noticed a trail of blood leading to a dark tree line. Without asking, he started to follow and he loaded his gun. As he did, me and Brian were both freaked out and just watched Eric as he went into the forest. He soon went out of sight, and Brian and I couldn't just leave him, so we waited. I passed the time by taking a skinny stick and poking at the puddle of blood. It smelled terrible and the aroma hit me pretty hard, so much so that my stomach convulsed and I threw up. "You okay?" Brian asked as he put his hand on my back. Before I could answer, there was a loud shot that echoed through the trees, and we both looked at the direction it came from. "Must have found the animal," I said as I spit into the grass. As soon as I said that, we could now see Eric. He was full on sprinting. "Run!" he screamed as he ran at us. I noticed he must have dropped his gun because he wasn't carrying it, but Brian grabbed my arm and yanked me towards where we had parked the truck. Without hesitation, I ran. We soon made it back to my truck, and my shoulder hurt from the rubbing of the gun strap. I looked back at Eric and saw nothing was chasing us, so I opened the truck and got in without worry. Eric climbed in and told me to hit the gas and go. I was so perplexed on what Eric saw out there, and I knew he hardly ever got scared of anything, so this started to freak me out. I started driving fast back to the camp and asked Eric, "What did you see out there that was so scary enough to make you drop your gun?" "I don't know, man. That was no animal." I followed the trail of blood and it stopped at the base of a tree, and I was wondering how the coyote was able to climb the tree. But when I looked up, I swear, I saw this hairy humanoid creature there. It smelled so freaking bad. Eric went on about how scary that thing was and how he was done with his hunting trip and just wanted to go home. We soon pulled into the camp and mutually decided that we were just going to go home. I started to pack my things, then I felt like something was missing. Lucy. Where's Brian's dog? She was usually always excited to see us back at camp, that she couldn't stop barking and wanting to be set free. As soon as I thought of this, Brian started screaming and crying. I ran over to where he was and saw that his dog was gone. However, on further inspection, I noticed what Brian was looking at. Something had pulled out the metal stake in the ground and strung up Lucy on a nearby tree and skinned her. Brian just couldn't stop crying, and Eric ran over to see what was wrong, and he just stood there, jaw dropped and frozen. He then muttered, "She was skinned alive, and there's a bunch of bruising caused by struggling around her neck where the collar is." "Shut up, Eric, you're not helping," I said as I put my shoulder around Brian, who had just unstrung his dog from the tree. "Skinwalker," said Eric in a low tone of voice as he looked off into the distance. He then screamed, "It's a damn Skinwalker." I followed his gaze and saw an animal that looked like Lucy, but it had human eyes and a sickly green glazed looking coat of fur. Brian stopped crying and just stood there, his eyes locked on the beast. Eric, then whispering with his voice quavering, "We all run to the truck on a count of 3, just leave everything else." Brian and I slowly nodded and agreed to the plan. "Okay, 3, 2, 1, Eric whispered sharply, and we all took off like a pack of gazelles for the truck. We hopped in as soon as we saw the Skinwalker lunge at us and struck the right side door with such a powerful blow that it nearly tipped over the whole truck. It didn't stop me at all whatsoever, and I drove out there faster than I ever could have. After that, none of us went hunting in that area again. We never even went back to claim our camping trailers and supplies. It was too terrifying to think that what happened to Brian's dog could have had happened to us and could walk around in our skin. Since that experience, I'm now a superstitious person. Living on the edge of the woods, you see some weird things occasionally. Being from Moonsville, a very rural town in Indiana that almost nobody knows about, these weird things had no shortage. Though it isn't a town anymore, it was an old settlement town in the 1800s, but now has a population of about 300, about 19 miles from the nearest gas station. So yeah, pretty rural. Back in fall of 2008, my story begins there. My house sat right on the edge of the dense woods. Those woods were where I spent many afternoons, and though I had weird encounters before, this would be the first time I ever had any experience with it. 2 of my friends were walking in the woods as per usual. We'd gotten about 1.5 miles, and that's when we noticed it. A black dog about 30 feet away. We paid no mind to it at first, until we began seeing it try to walk. It took steps as if it had never walked before. Its movements were jerky and uneven. We were unnerved, but had reasoned that it was probably just injured and continued our hike. About 15 minutes later, one of my friends had gotten my attention, pointing out that the dog was still there, but still at the same exact distance. Its movements still jerky and unnatural. It looked at us with deep yellow eyes, and in that instance, the air became dense, and the other friend with us had brought to our attention that there were no longer chirping of birds or a sound of the wind, just silence that seemed to whisper. At that point, we were getting scared, but the oldest of our little group had persuaded us into continuing. And so, giving into the pressure of the oldest, we continued against our better judgment and tried to ignore the dog. We walked for another 10 minutes, watching the quote-unquote dog the whole time. No matter how far we got, how fast we walked, it kept the exact same distance, even though it didn't seem to be walking. That's when the oldest of us decided that even he couldn't pretend that we didn't need to go back. We set off to go back to my house, once again keeping an eye on the dog, and once again noticing more and more wrong with it. It had too many joints in its legs, its spine was too long, its head seeming to distort. Those deep yellow eyes. The longer we looked at it, the more demented it began to appear. Starting off onto a sprint, we'd made it back to my house just before it got dark. After dinner, we made makeshift beds on the living room floor and went to sleep. That night, I was plagued by constant nightmares of the dog, on two legs just outside the large sliding glass door that faced the woods. That's when I woke up, and the time was about 1 a.m., but I felt compelled to look outside the sliding glass doors in the illuminated backyard. Just at the edge of the light, I could see that dog and its deep yellow eyes, smiling. I had woken up one of my friends and made him go out to the window with me. I thanked whatever God is out there that the dog hadn't left, but it wasn't smiling anymore. I told my friend to keep watching it while I went to the bathroom, and not even 20 seconds later, he was knocking at my bathroom door, whispering panically that the dog smiled at him. Later that morning, through discussion, we had all discovered that we had very similar dreams about the dog. Now, this was not my only encounter with this creature. Whether it was a skinwalker in the traditional sense, or just a dark spirit in general, I can't say for sure. There had been Native American remains found 2 miles behind my house, but I can't say that solidifies that it was a traditional skinwalker. But yet, skinwalker is the only name that fits, and it rarely seemed to have changed shape more than twice. Okay, so to start out, I live in Mesa, Arizona, which is basically Phoenix, Arizona, because the main cities of Arizona spread out into many cities with no border in between. Mesa is what I would call the suburbs of Phoenix. I live in an apartment complex that I would describe as close to the ghetto but still nice. I live in a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment with my girlfriend. Arizona is a state full of ancient Native American history. I live next to the Hohokam Canal, as do many Arizonians. The whole place used to be cities of ancient Native Americans. The point is, I'm in the area for what I believe to be a skinwalker. I'll get to my story now. Yesterday I was drinking, one of the things that I picked up on the COVID-19 quarantine, or what's enforced here anyway, and I decided to smoke a bowl in my apartment patio, which I don't usually do, mind you. I just finished uploading my pipe and taking the first hit when I hear a voice somewhere nearby. "Amanda, open the door please." It was young, probably a girl in her 20s talking. It sounded very calm and teasing. It continued on, and I tried to ignore it, smoking my last bud. After about 4 times of it repeating itself, my curiosity caused me to look for the source. I saw it in an apartment building facing across from me. I saw a dog on its hind legs leaning on a door, tapping. At first, I shrugged it off. Then I hear the voice again. The sound sounded exactly the same as last time. Exactly the same, as if you recorded their voice and played it again. There wasn't any other sound or movement in the complex. I watched the thing knock on Amanda's door for like 30 seconds in what I would call a state of shock and curiosity. I then stopped and didn't move for another 20 seconds until the dog thing stood all the way up, away from the door, on its hind legs and turned to face me. I made eye contact with it, which is weird because we were at least 50 yards away. I'm on the 3rd floor and it's on the 2nd, but I felt it looking at me. I held its eye contact. I was so scared I felt like I should have run. Then I got on all 4s and headed down the stairs slowly. At the bottom, I saw it slowly starting to walk towards me. I was on all 4s about to go inside or scream, I don't know, but I had to know what this thing was going to do. It walked close to my balcony. Yes, it was a dog. Brownish yellow, dirty looking things, with big eyes that were 100% attentive to mine. It didn't seem natural, to be honest, but nothing looked wrong at a glance, except that it was staring into my eyes, and it wouldn't stop. I ran inside as it reached the bottom of my stairs, and I locked my doors. Soon, I heard clawing at my door, doggy clawing. I heard the door handle jiggle. Then it started on my porch door, and of course, I never answered. Instead, I hid behind my kitchen counter with a knife. After about 30 minutes, it left. I stayed up all night, but I didn't see it again, and I didn't go out again. I'm hoping it doesn't come back. I haven't gone outside at night again. I'm burning sage and trying to be as careful as I can.